Welcome, wanderers of the shadowed vale, to Throne of Nightmares. I am your host, the keeper of fractured echoes, and tonight we descend into a hollow so deep it swallows light itself. Picture this: the year is 2025, but time bends strangely in the hollows of West Virginia. The air hangs thick as coal dust, laced with the metallic tang of rusting seams and the faint, sickly, sweet rot of things left too long in the damp. We're not in the bustling veins of America. No, we're in its forgotten artery, a place called Odd, West Virginia. The name alone should send a shiver skittering down your spine, like fingers of fog brushing bare skin in the dead of night. Odd isn't on most maps. It's a scar on the landscape, a cluster of sagging shacks, huddled against the backbone of the Appalachians, where the mountains rise like the hunched shoulders of ancient giants, weary from carrying the weight of unspoken sins. Here, the roads don't lead anywhere, they just peter out into mud, churned paths that vanish into the underbrush, as if the earth itself tires of visitors and pulls the way shut behind them. The trees. Oh, those trees! They lean in close, their bark etched with scars that look less like lightning strikes and more like frantic claw marks from something trapped beneath the soil. And the fog, it rolls in at dusk, not like mist, but like a living shroud, muffling cries that might otherwise escape. But tonight, we don't chase ghosts through the brambles. No, we seek something far more intimate, far more corrosive: a bloodline. The Whittakers. You've heard whispers, perhaps in the dim corners of the internet, where documentaries flicker like dying fireflies. America's most isolated family, they call them inbred. The tabloids sneer. A curiosity, a cautionary tale wrapped in poverty's rags. But I tell you this, those are the lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The truth is older, wetter, rooted in the marrow of the land. It's a curse woven from the threads of desperation, isolation, and a vow that bound a woman to shadows deeper than any grave. At the heart of it all beats the pulse of one soul, the matriarch, Betty Whittaker. 73 now, her eyes like chipped obsidian, reflecting not the world but the void it left behind. She wasn't born to rule, she was forged in fire and silence, the eldest of 15 siblings, sworn on her mother's deathbed to a promise that would doom them all. "Stay," her mother gasped, blood flecking her lips from the cough that ate her lungs like rust. "Stay and tend the blood. Let no stranger dilute what we've kept pure." Pure. The word slithers off the tongue like venom, doesn't it? In Odd, purity isn't salvation. It's a slow poison, distilled generation by generation until the veins run black. Let me paint you the scene that birthed this nightmare, so you can feel the chill seep into your bones. It's 1952, the height of some forgotten summer, when the sun beat down on the hollows like a hammer on an anvil, forging men into ghosts. In a cabin that sagged under its own weight, walls of weathered pine, roof patched with corrugated tin that rattled like loose teeth in a gale, Ethel Whittaker labored. The air inside was a stew of sweat, blood, and the acrid bite of kerosene lamps sputtering against the gathering dusk. No doctor came to Odd. They didn't dare. The roads were veins clogged with resentment, and the folk here, they carried grudges older than the hills. Ethel's husband, John, double cousin to her by blood, bound by a marriage that twisted family trees into bias strips, paced the floorboards, his boots thudding like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He was a man carved from the mountain, broad as a stump, face shadowed by a beard that hid scars from cave-ins long past. But his eyes, those eyes held the hollow's secret, a dull, milky gleam, as if the coal dust had seeped into his soul and clouded it forever. "Push, woman," he growled, though his voice cracked like dry leaves. The midwife, a crone named Hattie from the next ridge over, muttered incantations under her breath, old mountain charms against the haints that lingered in birth blood. Haints, they called them. Restless spirits jealous of the newly born, eager to claim a soul before it drew its first breath. The labor stretched into eternity. Hours bled into night, the cabin's single window a black mirror reflecting nothing but the void outside. Screams tore from Ethel's throat, raw as barbed wire, echoing off the hills until the wildlife fell silent, as if the forest itself held its breath. And then, with a wet, tearing sound that no one in the room would ever forget, she came. Betty, tiny, slick with the fluids of creation, her cry not the lusty wail of a healthy babe, but a thin, mewling keen, like a kitten drowned too soon or a wind through a cracked skull. They say, in the retellings whispered around campfires that dare not burn too bright, that the room grew colder in that moment. Frost rimed the window pane, though July's heat pressed against the walls like a fevered brow. Hattie's hands trembled as she swaddled the child in a quilt stitched from flour sacks, her gnarled fingers brushing skin that felt not warm, but fever-cold, as if Betty had been pulled not from her mother's womb, but from the chill belly of the earth itself. John peered down, his breath fogging the air, and for a heartbeat his face twisted, not in joy, but in recognition. "She's got the mark," he murmured, tracing a finger along the babe's palm, where a faint silvery line bisected the flesh like a vein of quartz in slate. The family mark, they called it later, a promise of isolation or a warning. But that was just the beginning. Oh, no. Betty's birth was the seed, planted in soil barren of mercy, watered with the tears of the forsaken. As she grew, toddling on floors slick with spilled moonshine, her bare feet leaving prints that seemed to linger too long in the dust, the hollows began to close in. Neighbors, sparse as they were, drifted away like smoke from a snuffed pipe. Whispers spread the Whittakers were too close, blood calling to blood in ways God never intended, children born with eyes too wide, stares too vacant. Skin pale as the underbelly of a toad, and tempers that flared like foxfire in the dark. By her 10th year, Betty had seen 3 siblings claimed by the mountain. Little Timmy tumbled into a creek swollen by spring rains, his body never found, just his shoe bobbing like a cork in the foam. Gracie Gina, who wandered into the woods one harvest moon and returned changed, her laughter turning to guttural barks that drove the dogs to howling, and poor Elias, who simply stopped. One morning his bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed, as if he'd dissolved into the ether. Betty found the hollow's truth: early isolation wasn't chosen, it was inherited, a mantle heavier than any crown. Now lean closer, listener. Feel the damp earth pressing against your back, the roots whispering secrets through the soil. Why do we tell this tale? Because in Betty's story lies the mirror to our own frailties, the fear that blood once tainted can never be cleansed, that promises made in desperation echo through generations, binding the living to the graves of the dead. And tonight, as the fog thickens and the hollows sigh, we will unearth it all, from the matriarch's first breath to the shadows that still stalk her kin. We will walk the twisted paths of odd, but beware some doors, once opened, let in more than light. They let in the night itself. You see, the Whittakers aren't just a family. They're a fracture in America's facade, a reminder that beneath the stars and stripes lies a tapestry of thorns, woven from poverty, prejudice, and the primal urge to cling to one's own, no matter the cost. Betty, with her unyielding vow, became the loom, threading sibling to sibling, cousin to kin, until the pattern emerged, a labyrinth from which no one escapes. And as we delve deeper, you'll hear the echoes, the growls from the porch in the dead of night, the shadows that flicker in family photos like uninvited guests. You'll smell the mildew of that cabin, taste the bitterness of well water drawn from veins laced with forgotten poisons. Imagine it you, standing at the edge of Odd as twilight bleeds into the hollows. The air grows heavy, pregnant with the scent of damp leaves and something sharper, sulfur, perhaps, from the coal seams that honeycomb the earth like the burrows of blind worms. A dog barks in the distance, not at intruders, but at the nothing that presses in, and from the Whittaker place a light winks on, a single bulb swinging from a frayed cord, casting long, distorted shapes across the yard. Inside, Betty sits, rocking in a chair carved from lightning-struck oak, her hands folded over a Bible yellowed with age and neglect. Does she pray? Or does she listen? To the voices, they say, the ones that murmur from the walls, urging her to keep the blood pure, to bar the door against the world. This is no mere tragedy, my shadowed companions. This is a genesis of isolation, a birth pangs that birthed a bloodline cursed to wander in circles, forever circling the drain of their own making. And as we begin our journey, through the mists of memory and the thorns of truth, ask yourself, what vows have you made in the dark? What blood calls to you across the years? For in the tale of Betty Whittaker, we find not just a family's fall, but the fragile thread that binds us all to the abyss. Now, let us step back through the veil of years, to the soil from which this bloodline clawed its way free. The year is 1880, and the Appalachians are a wilder beast then, untamed, unforgiving. A labyrinth of laurel thickets and sheer drops that swallow men whole. The Whittakers, or what would become them, trickle in like runoff from a higher storm. They're not natives, not Melungeons with their olive skin and tales of Portuguese pirates, nor the Scots-Irish clans with their fiddles and feuds. No, these are English stock, hardy as hickory, but brittle as birch in the frost, fleeing the factories of Pittsburgh for the promise of land that costs nothing but your soul to claim. It starts with two brothers, Isam Whittaker and his twin, Henry Perkins Whittaker. Born in '52 to a mill hand and his consumptive wife, they arrive in the hollers as young men, axes over shoulders, eyes hungry for timber and topsoil. Isam, the elder by minutes, is the dreamer tall, with a jaw like a plowshare and hair the color of storm clouds. Henry, shorter, stockier, carries the weight of practicality, his gaze always scanning the tree line for threats unseen. They stake claims side by side, building cabins from chestnut logs felled by their own hands, the axe heads ringing out like bells, tolling the death of wilderness. But isolation breeds necessity, and necessity mothers monsters. The brothers marry sisters, or so the records claim. Eliza Burton for Isam, Sally for Henry. The Burtons are from the next county over, a clan of tanners whose hands reek of hides and lie, their faces etched with the pox that swept the valleys in '75. Eliza is fire, red hair like foxbrush, temper that flares at the least slight. Sally water, pale, quiet, with eyes that seem to look through you to the grave beyond. The weddings are simple affairs. A preacher with a flask in his coat, vows exchanged under a canopy of sycamores, the river murmuring approval or warning. Who can say? Children come quick as they do in such places. Isam and Eliza birth 2 boys, lost to diphtheria before their second winters, then twin girls. Gracie and another, unnamed in the ledgers, who perishes in the cradle from the fluxes. Henry and Sally fare better at first. 5 whelps, sturdy as saplings, though whispers follow them. The Burton blood, they say, carries the ridge curse, a melancholy that turns laughter to keening, joy to fits of staring at walls as if reading messages in the cracks. By 1900 the haulers are changing. The railroads snake in like iron veins, pumping coal barons' greed into the hills. The Whittakers turn to mining, descending into shafts where the air tastes of sulfur and despair, lanterns flickering like willow, the wisps leading men to their doom. Isam loses an eye to a rockfall. Henry coughs black phlegm that stains his beard. The families draw closer, cabins blurring into a compound of lin toes and smokehouses. The Burton girls, now women, wedding back into Whittaker kin to keep the land whole. As Isam puts it, his one good eye gleaming with fervor. Here's where the roots twist, listener. Feel the ground shift beneath you, the soil parting like lips to reveal teeth. Gracie Whittaker, Isam's surviving daughter, born 1898, with hair like polished mahogany and a laugh that carries on the wind, grows into a beauty that draws eyes from Charleston suitors passing through on the coal trains. But the Holers guard their own. At 16, she's promised to John Whittaker, Henry's eldest son, her double first cousin. WC, mother's sisters, father's brothers. Blood so entwined it's less a river, more a whirlpool, pulling all into its depths. Their wedding in 1914 is the fulcrum. The preacher, same one, older now, his flask ever present, stammers the rites under a sky bruised with thunderheads. Guests a few kin clustered like crows on a wire, faces shadowed by bonnets and broad brims. Gracie wears a dress of calico, stitched with wild rose thread her mother spun from wool dyed in creek mud. John, 20, is a miner's build, barrel-chested, hands collused as bark, with that milky stare inherited from his father. As they clasp hands, a wind rises, tearing leaves from the oaks, swirling them into a vortex that dances around the couple like mocking sprites. It's a sign. Eliza hisses to Sally, her voice a rasp of worry. The haints approve, or they hunger. The union bears fruit swiftly, bitterly. Firstborn in 1915, a boy stillborn, his tiny form blue as the fugate blues from over the ridge, though the Whittakers deny the taint. Then, in 1917, amid the Great War's distant thunder, comes daughter Mary, healthy but quiet, her cries muffled as if underwater. More follow twins in 19, one dead at birth, the other, Ethel, surviving with a harolip that no midwife's needle can mend. Ethel, the one who will birth Betty, grows feral in the compound, climbing the ridges like a mountain cat, her eyes sharp as flint. She speaks little, but when she does, it's in rhymes cribbed from old ballads, prophecies of blood that loops and never breaks. The 1920s crash the hollers like a cave-in. Coal prices plummet, mines shutter, leaving men to scrabble in moonshine, stills hidden in laurel hells. John turns mean, his fists finding Gracie's ribs when the bottle runs dry. The family tightens, siblings wedding siblings in secret ceremonies by lantern light. No preacher now, just oaths sworn on a family Bible bound in calfskin from the Burtons' tannery. Incest, the outsiders call it later, but in odd, it's survival. The world's poison. John growls one night, whiskey on his breath, as he bars the gate against a peddler from town. "We'll keep ours clean." By the 1930s, the compound is a world unto itself, 15 souls under rusted tin, gardens choked with Jimson weed, a spring that runs black after rains. Ethel, now wed to her uncle, Henry's brother, a widower with one leg lost to gangrene, begins her own brood. 15 children birthed in that same cabin, each arrival marked by omens, crows massing on the fencer posts, the well groaning like a throat full of gravel. Betty, the first of Ethel's true line, emerges in 52 as we spoke, but her siblings trail like ghosts in her wake. Timmy, 53, drowns at 4, or so they say, though his body floats up miles downstream, unmarked save for gills like slits in his neck. Gracie Junior v 55, the barker, her howls summoning packs of wild dogs that circle the cabin, red eyes glowing in the moon. Elias, 57, vanishes at dawn, leaving only a circle of toadstools where his bed stood, as if the earth reclaimed him whole. And on, through the decade, Lorraine with her extra fingers, fused like roots, possum, mute and feral, who sleeps in the rafters and drops down at night like a noose. Betty watches it all, the eldest, her silvery palm line throbbing like a fresh cut. She tends them, bandages wounds from bramble scratches that never heal clean, spoons cornbread mush into slack mouths, sings lullabies whose words twist into warnings. Hush now, blood of mine, to keep the circle tight and fine, to strangers bring the blight, sear in our veins the endless night. The matriarch in embryo, she learns the rhythm of loss of birth, bloom, wither, bury. The hollows teach her that isolation is armor, brittle but unyielding, forged in the fires of necessity. Yet cracks form. In 62, a social worker from Charleston breaches the gate. Miss Harlan, starched collar and clipboard, eyes wide at the conditions. She sees the dirt floors, the chamber pots overflowing, the children with stares that pin her like butterflies. This ain't right, she declares, but John drives her off with a shotgun blast into the dirt. That night, fires start in the outbuildings. Arson, they whisper, or haints taking revenge. Gracie, Betty's grandmother, dies in the blaze, her screams curdling the milk in the pans. On her pyre bed, she clutches Betty's hand, 6 years old, unblinking, and whispers the vow of "Guard the line, girl. No outsiders." The blood remembers, and so it does. As Betty matures, awkward limbs stretching into womanhood, her face a map of hollows, harshness, cheekbones sharp as shale, the compound hardens. Siblings pair off, brother to sister, cousin to aunt, the family tree a bramble bush, thorns drawing blood at every branch. Betty refuses suitors from the ridge, distant kin, still too diluted. She becomes the keeper, mending roofs after storms that howl like banshees, distilling shine from corn that grows twisted in the shadow of the mines, burying those who fade under cans of river rock, unmarked to keep the devil from reading names. By her 20s, the world outside erupts, Vietnam, moon landings, but odd slumbers on a pocket of stasis. Betty's own children, none. The vow holds her chaste, a vestal in rags, tending the flame of blood that consumes its own. But the hauntings begin in earnest then, footsteps in empty rooms, cold spots where siblings once slept, whispers in the wind that mimic lost voices. Join us, Betty. The circle waits. She bolts the doors, salts the thresholds, but the isolation seeps inward, turning kin against kin in petty wars over scraps. Imagine her at 30, listener, standing on the porch as autumn paints the ridges in blood orange, a shotgun across her lap, watching fog swallow the path. A stranger's truck rumbles up once, missionaries with Bibles and pity. God's light for your darkness, they preach. Betty laughs then, a sound like breaking glass. God's light don't reach here. We got our own. She turns them away, but that night, the cabin shakes with quakes no mind could cause, dust sifting from the rafters like ash from a crematorium. This is the birth, the forging. The matriarch rises not from glory, but from the detritus of desperation. The double weddings, the stillborns, the vows etched in grief. Part I of our descent ends here on the threshold of deeper shadows. But hold fast, the hollows have more to yield, more blood to spill. The 1970s dawn on odd like a fever dream, oily and unrelenting. The compound, now a warren of trailers patched with plywood, encircled by chain, link rusted to cinnamon flakes, pulses with the remnants of Ethel's brood. Betty at 25 is the axis unmarried, unbowed, her body a vessel for the family's burdens. She hauls water from the spring in pails that slosh like amniotic fluid, cooks stews of squirrel and ramps over a wood stove that belches smoke like dragon's breath. Her siblings, those who survive, cluster around her like moths to a bulby possum-knowing Bones in the corner, his eyes feral slits, Lorraine weaving rag rugs with fingers that click like castanets, the younger ones, like Junior and Ray, shambling through days in a haze of congenital fog, their speech a slurry of grunts and half-words. Conflicts simmer, then boil. The vow that binds Betty chafies the others. John, her father, now a husk hollowed by black lung, rages at her celibacy. The blood needs fresh lupin. He wheezes one winter, his cough rattling like chains in a dungeon. He matches Betty to Junior, her half-brother, a hulking boy of 18 with a brow like a cavern overhang. She refuses, her palm line burning as if branded. Mother's word. She hisses, and John backs down, but not before his fist clips her ear, drawing blood that tastes of copper and coal. Hauntings escalate, no longer whispers but assaults. Nights in 73 bring the growler, as they dub it, a presence in the walls, scratching with nails like iron files, its voice a guttural rumble that vibrates the floorboards. Possum swears he sees it, a figure hunched as a goblin, eyes like embers, beckoning from the loft. One storm-lashed evening, as lightning veins the sky, the growler claims its first. Little Jenny, Betty's niece, 8, with curls like corn silk, wakes screaming of the man in the floor. By morning, she's gone, the trapdoor to the crawlspace yawning open, dirt undisturbed, but for a single handprint, small and smeared on the jamb. Betty seals it with quicklime, her lips moving in a chant cribbed from Hattie's old book. Earth, take your due, but leave the pure. Mysteries multiply. The spring runs fouler, water clouding with flecks that Betty swears are eyes. Tiny, unblinking, staring up from the bucket. Crops with the cornstalks twisting into knots that resemble nooses, tomatoes splitting to reveal seeds arranged in spirals, like fingerprints of the damned. Ray, the youngest brother, begins the fits. Seizures where he foams and speaks in tongues, words tumbling out in a patois of English and something older, guttural as Melungeon curses. The line breaks, the strangers come, blood weeps. He gasps, then slumps, oblivious. Betty binds him with rags during episodes, rocking him as she did the babes, but doubt creeps in like damp rot. Is this purity or perdition? By 78, the world knocks harder. A film crew, soft white underbelly, they call themselves, seekers of the grotesque, trucks up the rutted road, cameras wearing like cicadas in heat. Mark later, the director, a man with city polish and eyes that miss nothing, offers cash for stories. Just talk, he says, but Betty smells the dilution, their questions probing like scalpels into wounds. She lets them in once, for the money to fix the roof. The lens captures it all, the clutter of rusted cans and yellowed newspapers, the kin muttering in corners, Junior's vacant grin revealing teeth, filed to points from chewing gravel as a child. Betty speaks little, her voice a monotone dirge. We keep to ourselves. Always have. But in the footage, shadows flicker, unnatural, elongating behind her chair like fingers reaching. The visit stirs unrest. That night fires again the trailer of Cousin Buck. Wid to Lorraine, their children a litter of pale whelps, engulfs in flames that burn cold, blue as gas jets, leaving bones unscorched but twisted into spirals. Haints, the family choruses, but Betty wonders revenge from the blood, angered by the intrusion. She doubles the wards, iron nails driven into door frames, salt lines renewed at moonset, yet the dreams come, vivid, visceral. She wanders the compound as a girl, but the faces are wrong, siblings with her own features, multiplied into a hall of mirrors, chanting, "Join the loop, matriarch. Seal it forever." The 1980s grind on, Reagan's America booming beyond the ridges while Odd starves. Ethel dies in 82. The black cough finally claiming her, her last breath a rattle that echoes for days in the pipes. On her deathbed, amid quilts stinking of laudanum, she grips Betty's hand, now 30, lines etching her face like fault lines, and renews the vow. 14 left, girl. You tend him? No man? No child. The blood's yours to guard. Betty nods, but as Ethel's eyes glaze, a shadow passes the window, not cloud, but form tall, emaciated, with arms like branches denuded of leaves. The matriarch's burden doubles, she becomes nurse, judge, priestess. Chilling moments punctuate the decay. In 85, during a rare flood that turns the holler to a churning sluice, Possum vanishes mid-rescue. Betty chains a rope to the porch, hauling kin to higher ground, but he slips the loop, gone in a blink, swept into the torrent. Days later, his boot washes up, filled not with mud, but with river stones etched with runes like the Pom line, crude but unmistakable. Lorraine, grieving, turns inward, her weaving now tapestries of bone and twinety scenes of the family tree, branches coiling into serpents that devour their own tails. "It's comin'," she mutters, fingers bleeding from thorns she refuses to pull. The end of the circle. Vivid horrors bloom in the mundane, Betty's routines, milking the lone goat, its udder's veined blue, chopping wood till her palms blister anew, twist into rituals. The axe head, nicked from John's grave marker after his 87 heart burst, sings when it falls, a high note that draws birds to perch on the stump, beaks agape in silent screams. Junior proposes again, this time with a ring of twisted wire, his breath hot with a shine. For the blood, bets. She strikes him, the slap echoing like a gunshot, but guilt festers. That night, the growler returns, its scratches forming patterns on the wall's spirals, loops a family tree in reverse, roots plunging downward into abyss. By the 90s, the kin dwindle. Ray's fits worsen, he wanders off in 92, found weeks later in a cave mouth curled fetal, murmuring of the mother below. Cold womb, endless birth. He lives, but changed, his skin sloughing in sheets like birch bark, revealing flesh marbled with veins that pulse independently. Betty tends him in the back room, the sick ward, where the air hangs stagnant, thick with the scent of gangrene and regret. Strangers try again. Welfare agents, geneticists from Morgantown, sniffing for grants in the anomaly. Betty meets them at the gate, shotgun cocked, her voice a whip crack. "This ain't your story." But one slips through, a nurse young with pity in her eyes, offering vaccines, education. The family riots. Stones through windows, howls that scatter the horses. The nurse flees, but leaves a seed. Junior reads her pamphlet by lamplight, whispering of normalcy, the word a heresy. The haunting peaks in 99, Millennium's Eve. Y2K hysteria crackles on a scavenged radio. But in odd, the apocalypse is intimate. Betty dreams the compound afloat on a sea of blood, kin adrift on debris, calling her name. She wakes to screams. Lorraine birthing in the trailer, her latest. A girl with skin translucent as onion skin, veins a roadmap of the family curse. The child lives hours, gurgling prophecies in a voice too oldie. The matriarch falls, the blood spills wide. Dawn finds Lorraine catatonic, the babe buried shallow, a cairn of quartz-veined rocks. Betty, 47, stands unbreakable, but cracks spiderweb her resolve. She journals now, in a ledger bound with human hair, pages stained with tea and tears, chronicling the losses, the signs. The hollows eat us. She writes, but we eat back. The vow holds. Yet isolation's toll mounts rheumatism in her joints, like vines choking a trellis, visions at the spring, reflections not her own but a younger self, beckoning downward. Into the 2000s, the narrative fractures further. Documentaries return, later again in A08, capturing the decay trailers sagging, kin feral as the dogs they chain. Betty, matriarch in full, commands the frame, stoic, unyielding, her voice a gravel hymn, "We're fine. Leave us be." But off camera the growler howls, and shadows pool in corners like spilled ink. Siblings fade Lorraine in 12, wasting to wraith. Her last tapestry a shroud of loops unraveling. Ray follows in 15, his fits culminating in a seizure that arches his back like a bow, heart-bursting mid-cry. By 2025, Betty reigns over ghosts, a handful of kin, malformed and muttering, in a compound that's mausoleum now. Conflicts, eternal scraps over cans of beans, accusations of thinning the blood, with store-bought meds, hauntings. Constant the growler evolved, now voices in the pipes, chanting the vow in Ethel's rasp. Betty, 73, rocks on that porch, palm line faded but throbbing, shotgun across knees. Strangers circle, viral fame on screens, gawkers at the gate, but she bars them, the isolation absolute. This, the deepening conflicts of flesh and spirit, hauntings that claw from within. The matriarch's tale spirals tighter, a noose of her own weaving. But to understand the noose is not, we must trace the rope to history's shadowed loom. To grasp the Whittaker enigma, we must burrow deeper than the hollows, into the strata of history, where fact and folklore fuse like coal and anthracite, burning with an unearthly light. The Appalachians, cradle of this curse, are no mere mountains, they're a palimpsest, layers of invasion and isolation scrawled over indigenous bones. Before the Whittakers, before the Burtons, the ridges belonged to the Cherokee and Shawnee, peoples who knew the land's moods, who whispered of the little people. In the laurels, fairies or devils who stole children for their own. When settlers came, Scots-Irish in the 1700s, Presbyterian firebrands fleeing Ulster's famines, they brought ballads of Selkies and Banshees, blending them with native lore into a brew of superstition that still ferments in Odd. By the 19th century, Appalachia becomes America's underbelly, a treasure trove for timber barons and coal kings. The railroads arrive in the 1850s, iron dragons belching steam, carving gashes in the green. West Virginia secedes from Virginia in 63, a Unionist splinter born of resentment. But the haulers remain feudal, landlords like the Hatfields lording over tenants bound by scrip, company currency worthless outside the mines. Isolation thrives here, roads are afterthoughts, rivers treacherous, winters that bury cabins under snowdrifts 20 feet deep. Communities turn inward, clans marrying within to preserve plots, feuds erupting over a perceived slight or a stolen hog. The Melungeons, mixed blood folk of the Clinch Valley, rumored descendants of Roanoke's lost colony or Moorish explorers, exemplify this. Shunned as free people of color, they retreated to coves, intermarrying to safeguard secrets, their blue-eyed, olive-skinned children a living rebuke to purity myths. Enter the Whittakers' antecedents. English migrants from the Midlands, they echo the broader wave of 1800s proletarians fleeing enclosures and industrial hells. Pittsburgh's mills spit them southward, lured by free homesteads under the 1862 Homestead Act, 160 acres for a 10 fee if you could wrest it from the wilderness. But the act's promise saws soil thin as parchment, floods that drown valleys, fevers that fell families like wheat. The Burtons, tanners by trade, hail from similar stock, English or German records blur, settling in Lincoln County around 1870, their hides curing in vats fed by the Wyandot River, waters already tainted by upstream logging. Folklore seeps in early, mountain religion, a syncretic stew of Baptist hellfire and pagan holdovers, views inbreeding not as sin, but as sanctity. Keep the fold tight. Preachers in tone, echoing Old Testament clans, while granny women like Hattie peddle charms, asafoetida bags against evil eyes, sassafras tea to purify the line. The Ridge Curse, Betty's kin invoke, ties to broader legends. The Bell Witch of Tennessee, a poltergeist born of family strife, or the Mothman of Point Pleasant. 66 sightings portending bridge collapse, a harbinger for isolated bloodlines buckling under their weight. Economically, the noose tightens. Coal booms post-Civil War, peaking in the 1920s with 80% of U.S. output from Appalachia. But its peonage miners paid in scrip, housed in company towns like prison yards, blacklisted for union talk. The 1921 Battle of Blair Mountain sees tens hours in march, met by machine guns and biplanes, America's only airborne labor war. Whittakers like John descend those shafts, lungs filched by silicosis, the miner's canary, turned tomb. Prohibition 20s fuels moonshining, stills bubbling in hidden sinks, a currency stronger than scrip. The family's distilling, a rite, corn mash fermented with creek water, bottled under moons that folklore deems witching. Depression hits hard, FDR's New Deal trickles in via WPA roads, but odd remains off-grid electricity a rumor till the 50s. Welfare, stigmatized as charity for weak blood, rejected to preserve autonomy. Post-W. The war on poverty targets Appalachia. Kennedy's 63 visit spotlights hollers as or Ethiopia, but programs falter against distrust. Head Start schools close from floods, food stamps rot in mailboxes undelivered. The Whittakers emblematic embody this. Poverty as cultural artifact, isolation as identity. Genetically, the eerie authenticity chills. Inbreeding depression, real science, manifests. Recessive traits amplified from the fugate, blue people. Some methemoglobinemia, 1880s Kentucky intermarriages turning skin azure to Whittaker hallmarks. Cognitive delays, physical anomalies, that milky stare from optic atrophy. Studies e.g. 1990s UVA research on isolated clans map it. Coefficient of inbreeding soaring past 0.25 first cousin level, yielding vulnerabilities. But folklore romanticizes the pure strain, myth, echoing royal hemophilias or Amish Ellis Van Creveld syndrome, where dwarfism births, Exon, law. Culturally, West Virginia's mountaineer, trope. Deliverance 72 sodomy stereotypes or Hatfield, McCoy ballads. Others the folk, masking systemic rot. Songs like Pretty Polly, murdered by her lover in a mountain grave, echo the Whittaker vows fatalism. Haints, ubiquitous, hollow folk. Spirits of the unbaptized, lured by birth blood, boogers, shape, shifters punishing taboo. Betty's growler, kin to the wampus cat, a snarling harbinger from Cherokee tales, or the bell-ringing haint of coal camps, tolling for the doomed. Yet authenticity unsettles real interviews, soft, white underbelly, Twinhunty 2125 reveal resilience. Betty's stoicism, kin's loyalty, amid horror. Viral fame post-2020 amplifies TikTok's gawking at inbred zombies. But locals defend their us just hollered deeper. This blend, fact's grim ledger, folklore's fever dream, crafts the Whittaker authenticity not aberration, but apotheosis of Appalachian trauma, where history's neglect curses bloodlines to echo eternally. Educational, yes, but heed the eeriness. As coal fades a mountaintop removal scarring ridges since 90s, so does the buffer. Climate shifts brew floods fiercer. Isolation cracking under drones and data. The Matriarch's Tale, a legend living, warning that forgotten corners birth not just families, but fractures in the national soul. Now, shadowed scholars of the soul, we pivot from chronicle to contemplation, dissecting the Whittaker tapestry not with scalpels, but with the mind's cold blade. What symbolic strata lie beneath Betty's vow, this isolated bloodline's genesis? At core, it's a palimpsest of universal fears, the primal dread of dilution, the hubris of purity, the abyss of human nature when society averts its gaze. Symbolically, the matriarch embodies the terrible mother, Jungian archetype, devouring and nurturing in equal measure. Betty, sworn celibate, becomes not life giver but guardian of stasis, her womb a vault sealing the blood's purity. This inverts maternity where mothers birth to expand, she contracts, looping kin into an ouroboros of self-consumption. The poem line, a stigmata of sorts, echoing Cain's mark, not curse but covenant. binding her to isolation as divine duty. Psychologically, its attachment writ grotesque, Bobby's secure base twisted into a cage, where separation anxiety manifests as literal inbreeding kin as the only safe harbor in a world of strangers. Bearing the outsider's taint, thematic veins pulse with cultural trauma. Appalachia's othering, from 19th century barbarian ethnographies to modern hillbilly elegy narratives, mirrors colonial projection. The dominant self fears its shadow in the marginalized. The Whittakers amplify this, their isolation a microcosm of regional neglect, Cole's boom-bust leaving psychic scars akin to PTSD, inbreeding metaphor for economic incest, communities trapped in exploitative cycles, marrying, the company store till the line collapses. Universal fears emerge, entropies creep, the body as betrayal, genetic monstrosities, evoking Frankenstein's hubris and taboos allure. Freud's incest complex looms, the Oedipal knot untied not by exile, but embrace, yet here its survival's perversion, desire forged in scarcity. Psychologically, the hauntings signify the return of the repressed. The growler, Thanatos incarnate, death drive clawing through the walls of denial, punishing the vow's denial of arose. Betty's dreams, multiplied selves chanting, evoke Lacan's mirror stage, shattered identity fragmented in isolation's hall, where the big other, societal norm is barred, leaving only the real's horrors. Universal. Absolutely, we all harbor the hermit, the urge to withdraw when connection wounds. The Whittaker bloodline, extreme of schizoid retreat, where human nature's gregarious mask slips, revealing the solitary beast beneath. Ominous threads tie to broader dreads. In an era of genetic editing, Crespr snipping, flaws, Betty's pure line mocks progress, a Luddite curse on eugenics hubris. Climate isolation echoes it, rising seas, birthing island clans, forced inward by floods, their bloodlines fated to loop as resources dwindle. Culturally, Matu's reckonings parallel the vow's coercion. Familial duty as veiled abuse, women's bodies conscripted for lineage's sake, yet resilience glimmers Betty's stoicism, a near cinema fati loving fate's whip. Human nature. Dual destructive in extremis, but tenacious, weaving meaning from rot. Intellectually chilling if isolation births monsters, what of our digital hollows? Social media clans, echo chambers of pure ideology, inbreed memes till truth warps, Whittaker 2.0 viral yet vacant, the tale probes blood destiny or defiance. Betty, rocking eternal, suggests both. A Sisyphean throne where nightmares reign, but the matriarch endures, her whisper a challenge. Dare you trace your own line's thorns? This exploration leaves us not resolved, but resonant, haunted by the blood's insistent call, the fear that purity is but perdition's pretty lie. And so we emerge from odds more, breath ragged, skin prickling with the residue of revelations. The Whittaker Matriarch, Betty, forged in 52's chill birth, bound by a deathbed oath to tend a bloodline that devours its tail, stands as monolith amid ruins. Her tale, this genesis of isolation, unfurls not as linear tragedy, but spiral curse, ancestors' double weddings seeding the knot, hauntings harvesting the weak, the vow anews she wears as crown. 15 siblings dwindled to phantoms, a compound mausoleum to moonshine and madness. We've walked the hollers, felt the growler's scratch, tasted the spring-staring flecks. But closure. The hollows offer none, only echoes, lingering like damp in bones. Chilling summary Betty endures, 73 in this September of 2025, her chair creaking on porch splinters, shotgun a scepter against the fog. Kin shuffle in shadows, raise whelp, malformed murmurs, distant cousins, loops unbroken. The world gawks via screens, pitying or prurient, but she bars the gate, palm line faded to scar, purity preserved. At what cost? The blood's black vein pulsing with losses uncounted. Drowned Timmy's gill slits, vanished Elias's toadstool ring, Lorraine's unraveling shrouds. The matriarch's triumph is Pyrrhic isolation absolute, a throne of nightmares where love twists to duty, birth to burial. Yet a lingering question haunts, coiling like smoke from a snuffed lantern. What breaks the vow? Does Betty's death, inevitable as mountain rain, shatter the circle, spilling blood wide to strangers' dilution? Or does it summon the ultimate haint, the family unbound, ghosts flooding the hollers in a tide of reckoning? Imagine her final breath, rattling like John's chains. The line holds, but in the silence after, the door creaks, unbarred ajar. A wind sighs through, carrying scents of city exhaust, diluting the damp with diesel tang. Strangers come, not with pity, but hunger, for stories, for land, for the void she guarded. Listener, as you rise from this trance, carry the chill your bloodline, too, whispers vows in the dark, promises to kin, to self, to fears unface. The Whittakers teach that isolation isn't refuge, but rot's warm bed, that purity's pursuit births not saviors, but shades. Tonight, as fog presses your windows and branches tap like insistent fingers, ask what circles your own hollow. What matriarch watches from the rocking chair of memory? Sleep, if you dare, but know the growler listens, scratching at your walls, waiting for the loop to tighten. This is Throne of Nightmares. Until the veil thins again, keep the blood close, or let it spill.